what are the things that we would need to understand to know the person who you've become today?
Okay. Great question. Let me go all the way back to the beginning. All right. So I'm the youngest of 6. I am 7 years younger than my next oldest brother, and all of the rest of them are 2 years apart. So I was kind of like a last long distance, thought, I guess. But to hear my mom tell it, she was getting older and knew she was getting toward the end of her childbearing years, and she wanted to have one more child. And I am the equalizer because now we have 3 boys and 3 girls.
Cool.
It balanced everything out. I grew up almost like an only child, even though I knew I had brothers and sisters. They were always off doing different things. And so by the time I got to an age where I was in my rebellious teens, my parents probably were like, we've had enough of this. You just go do what you got to do, We hope it works out. Maybe they believed in prayer or something, but I did go astray. I did follow the worldly ways, and I dropped out of high school. I'm a high school dropout, although I did go back and get my GED. That's another story in and of itself, but I then went and got a college degree, and that took me down a path where I was able to work for an insurance company for a number of years. As soon as I graduated from college, I should go back. It was in the early 80s. It was a lot of unemployment and high interest rates and poor economy. I got a job in an auto parts store as a counter jockey. And that's another story because that's how I met my wife. But after that, I went to work for an insurance company, and I developed skills, business skills and communication skills and leadership skills that I never had before because of the path I was already on, right? Yeah. And now in my mid-50s, I had a great career, lots of flexibility, prestige, I guess, the respect of people that I worked with, and I felt very comfortable. And then our company got bought by a large multinational corporation, and things started changing. The culture started changing, and all of a sudden multiple layers of management started going between me and the top layer of the company.
Do you feel like that was to its detriment?
To the company's detriment?
Yeah.
Culture-wise, yeah, but the company's still around, it's still doing well. So, it wasn't bad for everybody. It's just that it started making me feel very uncomfortable. And I was working really hard at just kind of staying on the good side, it felt like, of the new management. And it felt like they were always trying to gotcha,
Yeah.
I'd wake up on Saturday morning feeling kind of nice, and I'd open my email just to see, to keep. And then there's a question from the new boss, what about this? And it's like, what do you mean, what about that? We talked about that a month ago, and you said, don't worry about it. Well, when are we going to have that done? And, it's like, oh my gosh. And, I'd spend my whole weekend stressing. So
less like communication and stuff between, or just like everybody wasn't on the same basis, you would say?
I would say that it was just a new culture, and everybody was trying to prove themselves and trying to use you to make them look better kind of thing.
So things were shuffling around. People saw that as an opportunity to like maybe settle in a higher rank than they were before or something like that. And that caused...
Yeah, I'm not sure of that, but it was corporate hidden agendas. It was
you can keep your a little close. Yeah.
Corporate cultural, chaos, basically. And I looked around and I thought, you know what? I could easily keep my job here. I could go through some difficult times. And then in 5 years, when I'm now 57, they could go, you know what, Rich, you've done a great job, but we don't have a job for you anymore. Your position is eliminated. So I started looking around, and I knew some people that were in the financial services industry. One of them told me that he actually had a company, and I thought, well, I just talked to him and he'll bring me in, and he said, we're really not bringing new people in, but if you want to get into the industry, Edward Jones or Baird are probably the 2 best companies. They're different business models, but They're probably both the best in what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on the internet one night and looked up Edward Jones, and they just kind of hooked me. They were like, take a personality test and see if you might be good for this role. So it'll take you about 30 minutes. So I started doing it, and an hour and a half later, I'm sweating, you know, and I completed it, and the result was, hey, you look like you might be a good fit. You can fill out an application if you like. It'll take you about 30 minutes. But you don't have to, but if you don't, then you have to come back and take this personality test all over again, right? And so I thought, okay, so I started going into this application. It was very detailed, and they wanted my mother's sister's social security and color of eyes kind of thing, you know, and I just, oh my gosh. But they allowed me, so really it was literally another hour at that, but they allowed me to stop that and be able to come back to it later. So anyway, long process, and then Edward Jones just naturally happened, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years, and it's been great.
That's great. That's great. So like, for those who, I don't know, naturally, I would think that somebody who, like you said, later in life found their career, there was a period, like settled into what would be their career. There's a period of anxiety before you kind of figure out what exactly you're going to do.
Or if you'll be successful at it once you've chosen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, deals with that. And potentially our day and age, the up and coming adults feel it probably more just for the nature of social media, and rather than the pool that you're judged from or looked at is kind of like a smaller pool of your town or high school, you're pretty much compared to everybody else. And I think that gives a lot of fear of judgment or an added increase of pressure to figure out who you are or what your career is. You know, so for people, I would argue that it's maybe even more for those reasons difficult to go through the anxiety of not finding your career. For those people, what would you offer as like maybe consolation or like what would you want to hear at before when you were in that position?
That's a great question, Stephen. It really is, because I know that when I was going through that, the people that I was talking to were telling me, yep, I've been through that myself, right? It's tough. Mm-hmm. And I thought, no, you weren't. You know, you didn't go through what I went through. But in fact, they had. Yeah. And they came out okay. And I came out okay, right? It's a recognition of the fact that life is going to do that to you.
Yeah.
No matter who you are, you're going to have experiences like that in your life. And you're going to be okay. One of the things that I used to do was, it was very stressful because the process was not, oh, just do this for a while, see if it works out, see if you make it, and if you make it, then, you know, jump over. It was sign a contract, put $75,000 on the line if you fail, if you fail to complete the process for them. And then I had to study and get my license within the first 3 months and pass a test, very demanding, industry type exam. And if I failed the test, I didn't have a job anymore, right? So I would go for walks every day. I spent probably 10, 12 hours a day studying, and I would take a walk to give myself a break and try to clear my head a little bit. And one day while I was out walking, I realized I don't have to worry about, passing the test. I don't have to worry about building a successful business. I don't have to worry about, whatever comes down the road. I have to worry about getting through chapter 3 today. That's what I have to do, is get through chapter 3 today. And that took a huge weight off my mind. So I've heard it called living in day-tight compartments, but that is the kind of thing that we need to remember. Number one, we're not the only ones that have ever gone through this, and everybody will go through it sometime. I have a friend who tells me that the advice she gives her friends is that whenever they're going through something difficult, I don't know how we're going to get through this, but I know that we have a 100% track record
of doing so.
Figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's true. As much as the possibilities for things going like wrong, if we look at our lives, like we're all still here and, you know.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people see like the bad things that happen in the world as evidence that there might not be a God. But I'm like, how is it even possible that anything goes well ever? You know, and the fact that that's actually the norm, that shows how much God loves us, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There was,
I wanted to ask, what do you think what has given you the strength at those turning points in your life when you said you struggled with drugs and alcohol? Was that before you got your college degree?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what was it that gave you the strength you have to have a certain level of faith in yourself to step out of being like, okay, this is where I've been so far, but I know it can be different. What gave you the strength to do that?
I did give you a little hint about the path that God works in mysterious ways kind of thing. So he placed this girl, if you will, in my path who happened to be involved in the GED program. And she, in the conversation, found out that I had dropped out of high school and said, "Oh, you should at least get your GED." And I said, "Yeah, I should do that because, I want to.
You're cute.
I
want to
get to know you. I want to date you. Yeah, you're involved." So, okay, I went down to the junior college and I signed up for the GED program and I went to all the classes and I never saw her. And I passed, got my GED. She shows up in the gas station again, just like, a miracle or so. And
people running the GED office take notes and hire cute girls.
So she's shows up in the gas station again, and I said, "Yeah, I went through the course. I never saw you." She says, "Yeah, I saw your scores. You did really well. You should think about taking some college classes." And I said, "Yeah, I should. I still haven't been able to date you, So I went down to JC. I signed up for some classes. I started taking college courses, and I was terrible. I was a terrible student. I was a high school dropout, I mean, I think I flunked algebra, just entry, college level 100 algebra 3 times before I finally passed it with a D, and the same thing happened with accounting. But anyway.
It's a tough course. Algebra 1's pretty tough, honestly.
Okay. But if you just don't have the skill of school is like, it's a new skill that you have to learn, and learning that at the college level, that's a hard time to have to learn it.
Yeah, especially after kind of having
taking
a break from it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what you were saying about living in the day-to-day present reminds me a lot of what I've heard people mantras of addiction recovery. It's basically there's a cure to addiction. The only problem is it's one day at a time.
Right.
You got to take it one day at a time.
That's right.
And that's that type of cognitive behavioral therapy that I find helps me with sort of some of my own anxieties and depression, but how do you feel? It's hard not to. How do you take things one day at a time when the issues that you're dealing with are in the future, are
right
tomorrow?
Uh-huh.
Well,
the reason I shared the story about the girl that I was chasing is that's how the Lord knew I operated. And so he tended to put, when I needed to change something, he put a woman in my path that would help me change that. So I was dating, so I went to college, met a girl, dated her for a number of years. When we graduated, we kind of went our separate ways, and then there was, and we were big partiers. She was a big partier right along with me. And yet, the next girl that the Lord put in my path was just a little closer to sober, and the next one was a little, and before you knew it, I was dating a good Christian girl who didn't want anything to do with smoking or drinking or, and so it was like, oh, well, okay, I got something different to do now, and that helped prepare me for the girl that the Lord put in my path that I ended up making my eternal mate. the mother of my children, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you live in daytime compartments when tomorrow is the thing? That's the thing. You can't worry. Nobody's got a tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nobody's got tomorrow promised.
So it's a false illusion thinking that your issues are
Exactly.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Yeah, that's great.
That's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, we can just end the conversation. No.
What were you gonna say?
Nothing.
Okay.
I didn't know what to say, honestly.
Okay. I have heard that when you were starting at Edward Jones, it wasn't even like you got into like a corporate thing and they had clients for you. You had to find your own clients.
Yeah.
Which takes really putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to hear about that experience.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Because once I studied from home all those hours and passed the test, then I went to St. Louis for our what is known as Know Your Customer, right? And it's 1 week of intensive training and practice. I had to get 25 good contacts a day. I had to talk to 25 people every day outside of class. You know, I went to class from 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m.
Oh, wow.
And then outside of class,
25 people.
I'm in Tempe, Arizona. St. Louis is our home office. We have a duplicate home office in Tempe, and I happened to go to that one. But 25 good contacts a day where I got someone's name, phone number, and a reason to follow up with them, right? And so that was my training and practice. And once I got back here, that's what I did. I went out and knocked on doors. Hi, my name's Rich.
So door-to-door contact.
A door-to-door contact. And I wasn't selling them anything, but I guess I was selling myself. I was introducing myself. And it was so stressful. 25 good, real contacts a day. And I know there were a lot of people who failed. There were 12 in our class, and there's 2 of us still in the business, right? It's tempting to make up a name and a phone, just take an address and look up their name, and put it on your list and turn it in. There you go. I got my 25, right? But you don't grow your business if you do that.
Exactly.
So it was 2-3 years of hell and about 2 more years of purgatory, and then things started getting pretty good.
Okay, cool.
So were you knocking doors for 3 years, or how?
Yeah, how long
really?
did the 25 contact? How long did that last?
That lasted for about 2.5, 3 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Would
you do it every day?
Yes.
Wow, every day for 3 years.
Every day. The more people I got as part of my contact list, the more I had face-to-face meetings and phone calls along with the door knocking. But for the first 2.5, 3 years, I was continuously trying to build new contacts. And they kept telling me over and over again, all you need is one person out of those 25 to become a client. You'll be wildly successful. And they were absolutely right.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of rejection just not even out of those 25, but just to get the 25, you have people telling you, "Oh no, I'm no, I'm all set. I'm good. I'm no."
People being rude sometimes too.
Slam the door, peeking out the window.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like it really doesn't take that much for it to be worth it as far as the yeses, but to get past all of those no's is a mentally difficult battle.
It
Exactly.
is.
I know that personally because
too,
I've
right?
done door sales. Yeah, and it is a mental battle, and in a way, you kind of have to take it one door at a time, one day at a time.
Right.
It's like continually compartmentalizing it for you to do the best you can.
I would tell myself, I would psych myself up. I would play games. Okay, the law of averages says that, 30% of the time I'm going to get rejected.
Yeah.
And so, or 30% of the time I'm going to have success. So, all right, I've had 10 no's. That means I'm going to start getting a couple of yeses here.
Yeah.
One particularly dreary day, cold, gray, late afternoon. No one was home. No one was answering their doors. I kept myself walking up to each door and knocking on it, telling myself that the person who opened that door was going to be Mom, and it was warm and dinner was ready, and she's going to go, "You're home." And so, I just psyched myself up. And when it comes down to it, and I think about how people live their lives today and where people live and how successful or unsuccessful they are. And there are a lot of people that are way more successful than I am, right? I mean, I feel very fortunate with what we have and what I've accomplished, but it certainly isn't something that I did myself or that, makes me great and wonderful, because it just isn't. I mean, first of all, the Lord guides your paths, and there are natural laws that if you live by those, if you're honest, then you develop integrity, and then people trust you, and then you have more success in the financial industries world. It's just a
trust
natural.
is huge in business.
Yeah,
It's everything.
in anything, right?
Well, in anything. Well, everything is a business reaction in a way. I think.
Right.
Not like economical, but like it's. I don't know. People don't like to look at it in terms of transactional, but really, like, if you shouldn't put like, Mrs. Morris, she was talking about vampires, just people that suck your energy and stuff like that. And I'm maybe kind of getting off on the topic.
Nobody wants to be
point
around
is-
someone that takes more than they give.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But my point is simply that the reason I think people are where they are is because of how they think.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. So if you want to think positively, it's easy, and we're wired to be negative. We're hardwired to be negative. It's natural for us to be negative. I don't know why, but
The monster in the bushes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fight or flight, right? But if you as soon as you get that negative thought, if you go, wait a minute, what's the worst that could happen? I have clients that I tell, well, the market seems a little choppy right now, and you seem a little nervous, but let me tell you what's going to happen. The market's either going to come back or the world's going to come to an end.
Yeah, right.
One of those two things is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So if the world comes to an end, you don't have to worry about your money.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't come to an end, it's going to come back.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it, right?
Yeah.
So it's how you think about it.
Yeah, that's true about all of us. Anytime we're worried about anything, yeah.
Why is this so much easier said than done, though? Like,
right.
because like you could understand it intellectually, this thing, but once it's actually a personal thing that actually hits home to you and you're going through it, it's like, oh man, I don't know if I can not worry about this now, or have a positive outlook.
The I don't know why it's the world is set up this way, but if it was easy, then everybody would do it and everybody would, right? And so this is part of the test, right?
Yeah,
Are you willing to get up and go to the gym?
Mm-hmm.
If not, oh well. Are you willing to focus on eating good foods and staying healthy, having quality of life? Who cares about quantity of life? You can take, these days, you can take any number of medications and extend your lifespan, but I don't want that. I want quality of life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people do.
But are you willing to do what it takes to get it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Is
We don't always connect that you have to pay the price in those small moments when you really want that cupcake instead
Right.
of the carrot sticks or whatever.
That's
you
what
know.
That's what I'm trying to do, is like get in the habit of whatever difficult thing that I need to do to get where I want to be. Look at it as, okay, this is just part of the ticket to get there.
That's right.
And it's difficult to have that, especially if you've never had that first getting there. It's so much
Exactly.
easier when you had that experience, especially multiple times. You're like, okay, I've done this for multiple years. If I, it's just the law of averages. But
got
that
it.
first time you're going off of like
Just pure faith at that point. Yeah.
pure faith,
Well, that's probably true. Yeah, I was going to say there's an old motivational speaker who used to go around saying you have to pay the price, and then he realized, why am I telling people that? You don't pay the price, you enjoy the benefits of doing the right things, right? And so it is a little bit of paying the price, right? We can view it that way, but think of it, it's just another way of thinking of it, as I'm going to enjoy the benefits of when I quit smoking. I would take big deep breath when I felt like I wanted to light up. I would take big deep breaths and go, wow, I feel good. Yeah, man, it feels so good to have that lung capacity. I feel so good. And I just keep telling myself, that I felt good. And that's how physically, I had a way of overcoming the addiction, but then mentally you have to maintain that. Otherwise you go right back to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So
Yeah.
what would you tell to someone who at this, like right at this moment, is a high school dropout, addicted, never really felt included or whatever? What would you tell them?
That is a hard thing to answer. It makes me very sad to think that there is somebody in that position, and it makes me sad to think that they may not have the advantage that I had of the Lord stepping in. I don't know. I mean, call it coincidence, whatever. I know that there's no such thing as, I believe there's no such thing as coincidence, right? It's, I don't know. And I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's hard. It's hard to think about somebody in that situation.
Seems like you love them.
Yeah. That's really hard. Really hard.
That's beautiful, though. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think
that's the biggest thing that they would need to know is that somebody feels for them.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And that it's not the end. It doesn't have to be like that.
It doesn't have to be. And I'm sure somebody cares for that person, yeah.
So as far as going forward in life, have you ever felt like there's a time in your life where God wasn't there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I go through periods in my life where I feel like my prayers just bounce off the ceiling, that there's nobody listening, God went on vacation or something and forgot to tell me, or I don't know what it is, but maybe those are just opportunities for me to examine my life and think, okay, what can I do to improve my feeling the Spirit? Maybe it's being of service to somebody. And I feel like that comes naturally to me. I always want to reach out and help someone. If I see somebody who, sometimes more than I should. We're in a grocery store and somebody's got a child like yours, that's crying, and I'll start going over there to see if I can chat with them and make them just sometimes just a change of venue, a different face. And my wife always has to grab me and pull me back. That's not your child. Just leave them alone.
I see that with Matt. I told you I haven't gotten to know you that much, but I see a lot of similarities in he's very generous, and I think that's awesome to see.
You gave so much to your son, and now he's giving to more people. That's the coolest thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm proud of my son. He's a good man, and my daughter too, of course. She's wonderful in some of the same ways and in different ways. It's
what has your family meant to you through all this process? Because you had a family as you were starting your career over. That
right.
It adds pressure, but it also adds motivation. And
it did.
What was that like being a father and going through that?
Yeah, and some of it was just telling. I remember I was on a drive between here and Muskegon for some reason. I don't know what it was for, but I was on the phone with my wife, and I was telling her, you know what? I'm not gonna lay down, honey. I'm not gonna stop. We're gonna figure this out. This was before I started with Edward Jones or even applied for work there. Was when I was just going through some stressful times, and I said, I don't know, whatever it takes, I'm gonna do it. And just saying that and saying it to her then made me accountable to somebody, right? So I knew that whatever it was, I had to do it. I was going to make this happen. I was not going to lose the house or, not be able to put groceries on the table. And Kim was a great partner to have in that too, because she lived a whole different life than I did before I met her. And she had a degree. She knew exactly what she wanted to do when she started college. She went and did that as soon as she graduated from college.
It's almost opposite.
Yeah, she made great money. she chose to stay home with the kids after we started having children. But so she was able to go back to work part-time and bring in just a little bit of income to just kind of, help if we needed it. We weren't going to be thrown out on the street kind of a thing, right? So we were in partnership on this thing, and she kept the things going around the house that normally I would have been involved with, because I was working 90 hours a week. And to put that in perspective, I would get up, I would be at the office at 7:15. I would fill out note cards, thank you cards, and those kinds of things from the people that I met the day before. And by 9 o'clock, and then I would input all that stuff. And then by 9 o'clock, I'd be out on the street door knocking. I'd have to come back to the office by 8 o'clock. You couldn't door knock after 8. And then about 10:30 or so, I'd be heading home. And then I'd get up the next day and I'd do it again every day of the week, except for Sunday. That's my schedule, right? And so people would tell me, yeah, I don't know if I can meet with you next week. I'm really busy. And I'd think, you don't know what busy is, friend. Yeah. So she kept a lot of things going here that I couldn't be a part of. And so it was a great partnership.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a mutual sacrifice towards the same goal. I like what you said about like the impact that kind of speaking it into existence could have, like just saying the words, and not only the accountability that's brought from that, but I even think about like the scriptures. In the beginning was the word. There's something powerful about words and the ability that they could have and bring to our lives, for better or for worse.
Right.
Like clearly when you're with your job, especially in the beginning when you're, do you still, I'm assuming, do you is door knocking ever a part of your job nowadays, or?
No.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't think so.
No,
right.
I don't even, I get people referred to me that I don't choose to take as clients anymore. Yeah, right. So
that's kind of like ideally what it gets to, is it's kind of like the referrals are kind of so, you have a reputation that people want to associate with and stuff. But like, as far, even if you're not door knocking, any interaction that you have with people, you have to speak words. So like, where have you found a way that you've been able to more precisely like kind of sharpen your words so that they accomplish your goals?
I spend a lot of time in my 20s. So Norman Vincent Peale, old time guy, wrote a book in the 50s called The Power of Positive Thinking. Mm-hmm. The actual title of that book was supposed to be The Power of Positive Faith, but his publisher said if you title it that, you're never going to sell any copies, right? Yeah. So it was the same book, but he titled it Power of Positive Thinking. I read that book multiple times, and that set me on a life of thinking positively and finding, I'd find quotes and I'd write them down on pieces of paper and I'd carry them around with me and I'd read them over and over and over again, and I'd tape them to my mirror and things like that, right?
When did you read that book for the first time?
When did I read it for the first time? I was, I don't know, in my early 20s sometime, something like that. Right. So you've always been inclined to try and think positively from that stage.
So
yes.
So it wasn't always, in your adolescence, it wasn't your natural inclination?
Not at all.
Interesting.
Not at all.
So you had to kind of build that muscle.
I did. I did. And what I learned was that from a friend of mine who's he's in the mental health field, was that our thoughts control our feelings and we control our thoughts.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So you just, and I had a business coach, Jason Selk, who he's written a couple of books, but he talks about a relentless solution focus. So within 60 seconds of having a negative thought, and you can tell that you're having it because it's anxiety, it's, you feel the, fear or stress. Anxiousness or stress or anger, whatever it is. I get this all the time when I'm driving on the road, right? Wait a minute. Okay. What's one thing I can do right now that could make this better?
That's awesome.
It doesn't have to be the solution. You don't have to cure cancer. All you have to do is think of one thing that you could do that could make this better.
Oh, I love that. That's great. And that focuses so much on an actionable thing like
Yes.
that you can do.
It empowers you.
Yeah,
It does.
absolutely.
It's focusing on what you have power over.
Yeah, I'm going
Right.
to use that for our kids. I'm going to tell Ivy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, I feel like oftentimes when I'm trying to like help my kids through something like that, I like might be inclined to be like, how are you feeling? Talk about your feelings. And then we get stuck in the feeling, you know,
Yeah.
and just thinking about your feeling. Like that's pathology right
I
there.
get
But if
too
you can
caught
think
up
of something
in
to do,
Yeah.
then you're out of it at least.
Especially because anxiety is like there's so many options. I don't know which one to pick. If you're
Right.
just like talking about it, you could ruminate and discover, oh, there's way more options. Still.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
worse, you know?
Exactly.
Whereas if you're just like, okay, what's one thing that I could do to make this better? Then it's like that momentum too. It's like you get a little dopamine when you hit that goalpost.
You do.
It's
you
this,
shut off the negative, the.
Sorry, you're talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot I was talking.
You shut off the negative.
You went. Yeah. What are the chemicals that you flow into your body when
Cortisol?
you start when
Stress?
you're thinking? Yeah, stressful.
Cortisol.
And cortisol. Yeah, it's poison, right? I mean,
It
it
is.
doesn't kill you instantly, but over time, it takes years off your life, right? So you stop the flow of that right away, and you start with the dopamine.
I love
Yeah.
it. That's great. Everybody needs an aim, you know? That's what sin is. Sin is missing the mark. You know, if you don't even set a mark, you're bound to miss
That's cool in context of without a vision, the land perisheth.
Right. The
If
people
there's
perish.
no mark to
Right.
hit, then you're
Right.
not going to hit it.
it. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I feel like I'm going to apply that in my life. I'm going to try to
Yeah.
think more positively.
Good. Good
Yeah.
for you.
So like, is there anything that you're interested in kind of exploring or talking about yourself? Like we're pretty open in general. Like if you, because just for context,
Yeah,
like we're
think
just,
about this as like a time capsule. You
Sure,
know?
we're
If there's
starting
one
the
nugget of
capsule.
wisdom you can gather from your life and give it to us, what would you give to us?
or maybe even this as like a journal for your grandchildren.
Sure. In fact, there are a couple of things. There are a couple of stories that I like to share because they're so indicative of God's hand in my life, right?
Mhm.
And one of them is how I met Kim. And I
Yeah.
mentioned I went to work in this auto parts store and I dated a girl there. Again, you know, the Lord slowly took me through the stages of little less partier, little less, a little more, you know, moral kind of woman. And I was not supposed to, I worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., but it was a real small shop and the owner had to work in the back. He normally covered the counter from 6 to 8 and he asked if I could just hang out and cover the counter. He had to do something in the back. Okay, I did. Well, it just happened to be on the day when this girl called and asked about rear window louvers for her new car. You know, they keep the sun out back in the day. And so she showed up with her parents about 6:20, something like that, on this day. She told me
Same day?
later, huh?
Same day as today?
Same day that I was
The same
Oh,
day that she
just
called.
happened to be, yeah.
Like, okay.
She called and she said that she talked to a lot of different places and we weren't the cheapest, but the guy who talked to her was really nice. And so she came and she was there with her mom and dad. And
That was the boss, I'm assuming, right?
huh?
That was the boss she talked to, I'm assuming.
No.
I'm joking. I'm
Yeah,
joking.
okay. All right.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Somebody
He's like,
hit
"That
him."
was me.
Yeah. So I just happened to be there, right? And I thought, oh, she's kind of cute. You know, wasn't dating anybody steadily right then. So we started walking around the store looking at things and we're talking and she's kind of witty and we're bantering, you know, and her mom is getting in on this. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a lot of fun. These are fun people. And then I look at her dad and he's going, so
He's like, I see what's going on here and I don't like it.
So I thought, okay, let's talk business. So I got, I brought him back up to the front counter. I was looking up some things in those big books that they used to have. And 5 years after we were married, we're sitting at this dining room table having dinner with some friends. And she tells the story of how we met. And she tells them all the stuff that I just told you. And then she says, and while his back was turned to me and he was looking in that book, I heard someone say right behind me, that's the guy you're going to marry.
Whoa.
And she
Goosebumps.
looked behind her, and there's no one there. She said, I heard a voice as clear as, that's the guy you're going to marry. And she was like, I'm not the kind of person that goes out and just... So she kept coming back, kept finding excuses to come back. She worked in the legal field, so she kept searching, is he divorced? Is he, what's his story? Is he married? Is he what, and she would have never found out anyway, because I went by Rich and my real name is Gordon. Right. So, but she kept checking in. One day she was there, I was talking with my niece and asking her if she wanted to go up to grandma's house. And so he's got a daughter, or something. Anyway, long story, ended with, we dated, we broke up. She hung around. She didn't let go. We got back together. I chased her until she caught me, kind of thing, or she chased me until I caught her, or whatever. But that's a fun story, I think, to tell people. And then we were told we would never have kids. It was not possible. I could not have children. We were dead on arrival, right? And so we worked with a fertility specialist for a couple of years. And then finally, it wasn't a couple of years. It was only about a year. It seemed like a decade, right? But we finally, last procedure, okay, if this doesn't work, we don't know what we can do for you. And Rebecca came along.
Yay.
And then a couple years later, we started saying, well, maybe we should call up, find a doctor, see if we can start working with a fertility specialist again. And Matthew showed up all by himself. So
While you were thinking about the doctor, you hadn't
while
gone
we were
yet?
just thinking about it.
No
Yeah, we haven't
way.
talked to a doctor or anything. We're
God
just
was
thinking,
like, I'm glad you asked.
yep, just waiting for you to think about having me, and here I am. So we thought, okay, well, we're all set then, and we'll have more kids if we're supposed to have more kids. And we never had more kids, so we're glad for the two that we have.
Do you have any advice for people who are going through that phase? It's the type of thing where infertility hits really close to home, and it's not something I personally have had to deal with, but it brings a lot of sorrow and sometimes, unfortunately, unnecessary shame. And I feel like that community, like people going through that experience, they're not considered as much in public conversation. And it's not the type of thing that they're going to bring up themselves.
Right.
So what would you give as maybe your own perspective of how to maybe console themselves through that period?
What we learned working with a fertility specialist was that even when everything is perfect, you only get pregnant 25% of the time. It's a pretty low success rate unless you're 17 years old in the backseat of your parents' car out in the field or something. Then it's 100%. But, otherwise it's a very, according to the experts, right? It's a very low percentage, even for normal people who have everything just going right for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know, looking back at how I lived my life prior to this, maybe I impacted some of that too. But I don't know. I firmly believe that God has a plan for each of us, and it's all going to work out. It's going to work out the way he has it planned. And, before I came around to this, when I just starting with my job in the insurance business, working at the auto parts store, I was trying to get out of that. I was trying to get into something professional and grow. I was married now and trying to be somebody. And I interviewed for half a dozen jobs over a year and a half-ish. And I was just so defeated every time I thought, oh, that interview went really well. I think I got a chance for this one. Rejection, rejection. And then when I did finally get a job with the insurance company, I looked around at those other departments that I was potentially going to be working in, and I thought, man, I'm glad I didn't get that job. I ended up in exactly the right place, a small department with a very good manager who helped me develop and grow and was interested in watching me grow, not just using me as one of her pawns,
Yeah, that's beautiful. That type of relationship's like huge.
That's golden,
And it's hard to find that type of relationship because that is indicative of a true friend, somebody that celebrates with your wins.
Someone who has confidence in themselves enough to help you,
bolster
right?
up you when you're victorious.
But the thing is, God knew where I needed to be and what was going to be best for me. And I just prayed. And, people think I'm joking, but, see you tomorrow. Well, God willing.
Yeah, right.
Whatever.
Right.
I would, have a pain in my chest and out in the woods and I'm working with, whatever. And I'd go, well, today's a very good day to die, I guess. If I die today, then I'm going to die today. I think that God has a plan I'm not going to die before it's my time. And when it is my time, I'm going to die. It doesn't matter if I'm sitting here on the couch or if I'm out riding my motorcycle, through the woods, whatever.
So do you feel like you've had like encounters with like divine intervention as far as protection? Because I feel like I've had experiences where I kind of look back, or even in the moment, I'm like, something worse should have happened there.
Yes, I do know. Do you want me to tell you a bunch of stories?
If you want to.
I mean,
First one that comes to mind.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is I was out driving around. I was in an altered state of mind. I was in it was in the mid-'70s. I bought a new Mercury Cougar. I was super cool. And I was just out cruising around, and I'm driving down the road, and there's a bunch of kids hanging out in this empty parking lot over here. It's kind of an industrial part of town, and a couple of cars parked, a bunch of kids, and they're jumping up and down and yelling, and I'm thinking, whoa, they're having a good time, and I go, and all of a sudden I see this big light. There's a freight train. I was going across the track right in front of a freight train.
Oh my goodness.
I jerked my wheel, and it's like, holy smokes, and they were all trying to warn me, right? There's a train coming, you idiot. And I'm just thinking, oh yeah, well, that's cool. You guys having a good time. And there have been lots and lots and lots of those kinds of examples where I should be dead.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd live past 25, to tell you the truth.
Mm.
I probably told friends that with some bravado back then, but glad that I did.
Yeah. It's just interesting to think everybody has their own life path. Some people need to learn the hard way through experience. Some people, I don't know, they are able to look at others and learn from their experience, And
Right.
Like you say, God has a plan for everybody. I think
so.
Like, I love chemistry,
Mhm.
and I think of everybody as an individual element.
Okay.
Like, you have the noble gases, which are really stable as elements because their
Not
outer
I.
shell is full, whereas the other elements, they're wanting to fill it. So
Mhm.
they interact with others that are missing two when they have two extra to combine to make like sodium chloride, and they're a stable compound. And I
Okay.
look at like me, I'm sodium, she's the chloride.
Mhm.
If I focus too much on myself, I'm gonna feel depressed because I'm not perfect.
Right.
But if I focus on serving others, there's like a bond made that not only am I able to help them, but like I'm feeling that part of me that I was mulling over anyways, you
Right.
know?
Right. I'm a lot that way too. I've never had a lot of confidence, self-confidence, and I've always felt like I was not good enough. And we're all imperfect, right? One of the things that I learned early on in my business was when I'd get too stressed out and not be able to, one of the veterans told me, just stop what you're doing and think of somebody to thank for something. Think of someone to be grateful to and write them a little note. And so I do that, there were lots
That was
of
a
other
leader in your job
lots of other advisors, just other guys like me, like I do now for new guys or gals, right? That need encouragement or whatever. Someone at one point was inspired to send me a book by an industry, financial person, writer that a lot of financial advisors look to for advice, kind of a thing. And it was just
like
the
Ray
thing I needed.
Dalio, or
His name was Nick Murray.
okay.
And one day I was out prospecting. I was at a city hall meeting, trying to get clients that way, and I offered. Well, a business owner needed a ride home back to her store. And I was going to be going right by, and she asked if she could have a ride. So I said, sure, But she obviously could tell, was very depressed and ready to give up. And we just talked about other things. It was a 5-7 minute ride. And just as she got out of the car, she said, don't you give up. We never talked about me being stressed or me thinking about giving up, nothing. She just said, don't you give up. She got out, closed the door. Okay, I won't. I went back to the office and got to work.
Did that help you?
It did.
Yeah. Sometimes such a small word of encouragement is so like important and received. I feel like, especially for men, and I could be wrong, but I feel like, men and women both have their own difficulties. And one of them that I think applies more towards men is just like not receiving compliments or gifts and stuff like that as freely, and I think that it's important to recognize. That's why I try to always like be nice, and when I see a dude with like a really well-groomed beard, I compliment it, because it's like every time I could tell that he really likes that, it's something that he's taking care to. But those types of words of encouragement, I think, take way less for us to get, like, the price that the cost of us giving it is way less than like what they're receiving.
Absolutely. I mean, so you're on the right track, because I was going to say, I go around trying to give that word of encouragement, trying to smile at people instead of, nod or, whatever. Just try to give people positive. There's so much negativity out there. Everybody's dealing with their own thing. You don't know what they just had to go through or what interaction they had with who or why or whatever. Just try to be nice, right?
I like that. And you've been strengthening that positive thinking muscle enough that now you can give to other people.
I hope so.
A lifetime of training. What you're saying about that advice that you got to write a thank you note when you were feeling anxious. That made me think about, recently I heard this, and I don't know if this is true. This is secondhand information.
I know what you're saying.
But I heard that the same center of our brain where we feel anxiety is the same center that lights up when we express gratitude. So like it can't be both at the same time.
It can't.
So the anxiety will stop if we're focusing on gratitude.
That's another thing that Dr. Jason Selk that's one of his respect bandwidth. You cannot focus on more than one thing at a time. And that's why changing the thought
so powerful.
Makes a difference, right? But even choosing goals, don't choose 5 goals, choose 2, 3, 1, just stay focused, respect bandwidth. It's biological.
Yeah.
It's biological.
Yeah, that's cool. That's true.
I feel like we should probably wrap it up. It's getting kind of late.
Is there anything that you would want to share or shout out for the viewers? Or just anything.
Yeah. Any last nuggets of wisdom?
Or just,
Yeah.
Like any books or anything, anything like you'd like to shout out, just period, anything.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm far from perfect, right? We're all imperfect. I have, I've never been a good reader. And
me neither. It's been a constant struggle.
Right.
That's why I like podcasts.
Oh, cool.
Listening.
Yeah. Well, what I've done recently is I realized that I was letting the social media stream of consciousness just impact me too much. So I haven't completely dumped them, but I moved them 3 screens back, right?
Oh.
And I got a book app, and then Project Gutenberg is a 75,000 book resource, and they're mostly out of print and discontinued books, but they're really interesting books. And so now whenever I sit down and grab my phone and think about looking at Facebook, I go to the book app instead.
Cool.
And I just start reading. And I've read, I've probably read 1 or 2 books a year for the last 20 years. I've read 5 or 6 books already this year.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I really like that idea of simply shifting those apps, not completely like abolishing them and being
Right.
like Puritan, like none of this, because but like shifting it aside, like at the shelf that you don't need to access as much, its proper place, right? For
Right.
me, the kind of that object permanence is like really impactful with my ADHD and stuff. I feel like how you structure your environment is really influential, and that's just something I'm going to implement. So thanks for this.
All right.
Well, we appreciate it so much. Thank
Thank
you.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. It's
Yeah,
been great.
my pleasure.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.